That's right, folks. Welcome back to the machine of world events transpiring in front of us faster than we can interpret them. Many of them false flag and staged events. This machine of interpretation, which in each one of our cases is subjective. A tree falls in the forest, and perhaps it makes a sound, perhaps it doesn't make a sound. But in the case where it makes a sound, the sound that two separate observers will both hear will not be identical. They will both walk away with different descriptions of that sound. And the machine of interpretation is under attack in an attempt to control it, control what you perceive, and control, more importantly, what you interpret your perceptions as and assign them meanings in the process. Today, we're going to talk about the word control and its use in several ways that are seriously affecting our world around us on a daily level. And we're going to talk about some current events that tie in their uses as I discuss some of the ways in which the word control is being manipulated. My name is Alex Studer. I'm the guest host, sitting in for Truott, who had, up until yesterday, planned on doing the show. Something came up. He's got to deal with some patient-related emergencies, so I'm not going to be able to really give too many details at this point on his current activities or whereabouts and why he cannot be at the show. And I'm certain that in his own at his own choosing and in his own words, he will bring you up to date as to why he couldn't make the show today. But I happened to be available. He called me and I said, yes, of course, I'll be happy to do the show for you. I don't really have any guests to bring on today like I have in previous shows, folks. So we're going to open up the phone lines, and anybody who would like to can certainly call and chime in with any comments or questions as we go through the next 2 hours of time on this, the story behind the story, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And folks, yes, this is listener-supported radio. Without you, we don't have a show. The only reason I'm on the air right now is because someone like you made a donation a little while ago. And it's these donations that keep these shows going, keep this network up and running. There's no sponsorship. There's no Coca-Cola coming in and throwing ads up in your face. There's no clear channel subsidies. So your donations are the lifeblood of this radio station. Please, if you can, if you haven't made a donation recently, or if you're just new to listening, do what you can. Go to freedomslips.com, make a donation. No donation is too small. You're contributing to the last bastion of free American speech. It's money well spent. That being said, the phone line for anyone who wants to call in is area code 310-421-4053. And if you have a computer and you want to use Skype, the Skype handle for Studio B is Freedom Screen 2, all one word. Today is the 19th of June. It's Friday. I'm coming to you from the back of a rusted out. Well, I'm coming to you from actually on top of freshly clean laundry inside the back of a rusted out ice cream truck somewhere under a bridge in the beautiful city of San Francisco. It's been quite a day out here in the left coast, folks. For any non-television watching people, our local team in basketball, the Golden State Warriors over in Oakland, became NBA champs on Tuesday, defeating the Cleveland Cavaliers in Game 6. They returned yesterday, and there was a giant parade and rally today. 1.1 million people turned out over near off the shores of Lake Merritt in Oakland. And there was a fantastic parade and a lot of wonderful things said. And it's, in my mind, a great, great shot in the arm for a city that's been struggling with so many social issues, cultural issues, crime issues, legislative issues, and infrastructural issues. It's nice to see everybody so happy and unified and in general behaving well. I say in general because throughout all that there was some malfeasance. You can't put a bunch of people together without one or two of them being a rotten apple, and it's bound to happen. But yeah, there was a shooting during the rally about a half mile away. 2 people hurt in the hospital. No arrests made. Standard. The Gavmeister was down here. Gavin, who I used to pal around with when I was a youngster. I had no idea who this guy was. He was just friends of friends, and we all hung out together. But now he's lieutenant governor, and isn't it just so funny to see him coming down and playing off like, yeah, I'm a basketball lover too, you know, da-da-da. I mean, you know, everybody. When in Rome, the new mayor, oh, it's all her doing. She's so happy that this all happened, and she basically just got voted in because she wasn't obviously misusing her power, such as her predecessor was clearly. Celebrities, shenanigans, hijinks. We'll get to all of this in a minute. On top of all this today, Slick Barry is in town. His motorcade just drove by again about, 20 minutes or so ago. A long sea of sirens, cops on motorcycles, their Secret Service van with 3 or 4 inch glass windows, helicopters flying overhead, just low flying giant military choppers. Very, very strange to see up close. And for me now, the 3rd time. I saw him go by. I just happened to be on the corner as the whole thing went by the last time he was here. And today I saw him twice. Not by, any plan of any kind. He just happens to be cruising through by where I was on his way to get from downtown out to this hoity-toity benefit where people paid between 10 and 30 grand to attend. And I guess now he's back down to Air Force One to bug out of here because he's hopefully done being here. I'm certainly done thinking about him being here. And for those who aren't clear on why I call him Slick Barry, there's a cute little website called slickberry.com. Go there and you'll see why. Just paying homage to the founder of this show, Dr. Truott, A. Truott, Ph.D. Yes, that's his real name. There are those who claim that his middle name is not true, but it's on his birth certificate. It's clearly there. He's not making it up. The reason he chose to be called that name was something having to do with being ridiculed and humiliated while a youngster for his first name, Alma, apparently being perceived and interpreted by other children as a girl's name, which he didn't like. And so he went by True. And it's not any indication that he means to assert himself as being truthful. certainly I believe that his actions and his behaviors, speak for themselves in that regard. But certainly he's not tried to capitalize on an image represented by that name. It just happens to be his name. And it's less girly sounding than Alma. So, I mean, that's pretty much the end of that for anybody who's been contesting that, such as they have been. His blog, which he has a collection of papers and other links, and he doesn't update it daily, but when he does, it's meat and potatoes. It's real good stuff. It's atruott.com, atrueott.com. There is no other site for him, blog-wise. That's it. That's the only one. The only other site for him is something that he himself does not promote out of, I guess just humility, and he wants to keep his show pure and non salesman-like, and I can understand that. But I don't have a problem telling you folks that one of the reasons I became so fascinated with him is for his research in frequencies and minerals and their relationships, and the end result of his research are things that he puts together and makes available over at a site called Mother Earth Minerals. The site is meminerals.com, and there's more literature there and lots of things you can look at there. I encourage all to do so who are interested. My relatively pathetic and insignificant little blog is labvirus.com, and it's on its third iteration. It's 3.0, because two previous times it's been attacked and hacked and taken down under false allegations by some of these agent provocateur attackers that we have aiming their guns our way in response to just obvious truths that I and others have merely restated. I haven't brought anything original to the table. I've just restated the obvious, but all of a sudden they're so upset about it, then all of a sudden they have to go and tell a bunch of lies and really go to some very extreme measures of an obscene variety, folks, to counter and it's a never-ending saga. There's always a new chapter right around the next corner. We'll talk about that too today, folks. It all ties in as we get into this discussion of the word control. Other things going on today, just to kind of wrap up how crazy today has been in the city. We also are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the creation of City Hall. So there's a giant fair thing going down there with a Ferris wheel and a giant, hoot to do, and celebrations going on there. And then I look up in the sky, and I know that my other friend who was on the show last week, and it's a shame we ran out of time because I wanted him to give some better contact info, and maybe we have heard from him on another screen, and I'm just not paying attention. Okay, no, he's busy doing some other stuff. But my friend Patrick Roddie, my fellow Scotsman with the real Scottish accent, he's on his way to Paris to present a paper and do some mingling with other members of this chemtrail truther community, and he's been crowdfunding it, and it looks like he's all ticketed and locked and loaded, ready to go. I really appreciate his coming on the air last week. I'm sorry we didn't get enough time, and hopefully we can bring him on again in the future, because I really wanted to talk more about this particular version of control, transhumanism, which I believe is a very key component of this whole chemtrail thing. And I bring this up only because as I was looking around at all these festivities and the thing going on in Oakland and the motorcade running, I look up at the helicopter. What's behind the helicopter? Oh, all these long white oh my goodness. It's another very chemtraily day. And I'm sure there's a song in that I'm going to be writing very shortly called "It's a Chemtraily Day." It's been percolating, folks. So the various, let's get first, let's look at the word control for a minute. And I have up the dictionary definition of the word control. Let's start with the etymology. It's from Middle English controle, from Old French contrôle, from Medieval Latin contraro tulum, or otherwise a counter roll or register used to verify accounts, like a count roll. Okay, from Latin contra, of against or opposite, plus the medieval Latin rotulus or Latin rotula, which is roll a little wheel, diminutive of rota, a wheel. As a verb, the word control is simply to exercise influence over, to suggest or dictate the behavior of. As in, with a simple remote, he could control the toy truck. So, this word control, we're going to talk about some unpopular and downright controversial uses of it. We've talked in the past of weather control, which is kind of what we discussed a little bit last week, and we kind of dabbled into it. Truott has done a presentation which he gave at ConCon a couple years ago. It's on YouTube. You can go look it up. It's called Weather, as in the word weather, WEATHER, Weather or Not. It's a 2-hour lecture about NASA and weaponized weather control systems. We've also talked about quote-unquote disease control, as in CDC, the Center for Disease Control. Isn't that an odd way of labeling yourself? And so they had to put on and prevention. Okay. Oh yeah, and prevention. So it's CDC in little parentheses. Oh yeah, also and prevention. Well, I don't call them that. I call them the Center for Disease Circulation and Proliferation, because that's what control is in the field of disease. And certainly my whole blog, my research efforts over at labvirus.com have been very focused in those areas. But today, I want to talk about some other uses of the word control that are very relevant and very current to today's activities, specifically here in San Francisco. Gun control and mind control. And both of those are in serious, huge play. In addition to disease control, on so many different layers, I'm not exactly sure where to begin. But since we talked about Slick Barry already, let's go straight to him. I assert straight up that he is a Manchurian candidate, mind control puppet slave, with probably as many as 500 separate individual, unique, and recallable, quote-unquote, alters or personalities. And he is at the mercy of handlers who know all the codes and how to make him dance, so to speak. He was here in San Francisco. And if you don't believe that program exists, I'll get back to that, and we're going to go deep down the rabbit hole, folks, and wait till you get a load of this. If you don't think mind control is real, stay tuned for the rest of this show, folks. Strap in and take notes. It's going to be good. However, so here we have Slick Barry here in town, who I just completely acknowledge is 100% presidential model MK, or as we call them now, monarch slaves, as in the monarch butterfly, right? And there's a great film called The Butterfly Effect that semi-represents a lot of this sort of concept. However, without digressing too far, he's in town, and before going to these fundraisers, he's attending this conference of mayor's conference, which happens to be here. And so obviously we've got our mayor and a bunch of other big city mayors. And what's the first thing that he's talking about? Okay, he's talking about Charleston, South Carolina shooting. This Dylan Roof guy. And we're not talking about him and his illness as wanting to, why did he want to do this? No, it's the gun's fault. We need to have gun control. We need to now step up our efforts for greater restrictions to your average American. Well, folks, here's what I got to say about gun control. Okay? Gun control is using both hands and hitting your target. Guns don't kill people. Guns are not a threat. Gun is an inanimate object. It is not a weapon until it is picked up and used as one. Until then, it is an inanimate object. It is a firearm. And unless a person is attached to it, controlling it, it has no capacity to get up on its own and go shoot people. If you take away the gun from a psychopath intent on killing someone, do you think you've solved the problem? Or perhaps do you think the psychopath intent on his decision to murder someone is simply going to find another thing, another object, another weapon? Anything can be a weapon if you use it as a weapon. Okay? Your crayon that your little child plays with, if used a particular way, could kill someone. It then becomes a weapon. Are we going to take crayons away just because they can be used to kill someone? Do we blame the fork for making people fat? This is backwards. It's illogical, it's irrational, and it's mind control in progress. This is a repetition game where repeat the lie often enough and people will begin to believe it's the truth. And I'm telling you folks, do not buy in. There's a sucker born every minute. Don't be one of those people. This is a very serious game they're playing, and it's coming in on a couple different fronts. This vaccine issue that we're fighting here in California, Dr. Richard Pan, state senator, I allege he too is most likely a full-on mind-controlled puppet slave. He always appears in public with one or two handlers right by his side. He's been caught fumbling his words and completely losing his train of thought. He's obviously not the author of any of these pieces of legislation that he claims to have authored and introduced, which were obviously well written prior to his even showing up in state senate. It's a pandemic of mind control and its infiltration into our state legislations and beyond. This is a program that has been going on for many, many, many years and really kicked into high gear at the end of World War II, when during Project Paperclip we imported some very important ex-Nazis. Dare I say one of them was most likely the very much alive Adolphus Hitler, also known as Adolf Hitler, who by accounts that I've researched, lived out the end of his life here in Northern California, north of here, passing away in the year 1986. But also, more importantly, we brought across some ex-Nazis that went on to form NASA, JPL, DARPA. Some of them also went into the field of mind control, guys like Joseph Mengele and a few of his proteges, one of whom, this guy, Dr. Ewan Cameron, who was also known as Dr. Green. Spinning the time wheel a little forward into more current day, we have a couple pals of this guy, Michael Aquino, who back in the 60s was a protege of Anton LaVey in his little Church of Satan. While many ridiculed LaVey as just being sort of a fame seeker, trying to use his little spiel as a way to just throw parties and control women, and he seemed to be more of an egotist about it all. Aquino was a little more serious and a little further off the deep end, considerably smarter. He branched away and formed his little, which is no longer little. It's pretty much the de facto widespread Satanist organization for anybody in the military, and it's gotten some serious momentum behind it and funding. The Temple of Set. And I caution you, Christians, anybody dabbling in this, treat this site with utmost care. Do not go there lightly. Do not be swayed by this guy's writings or charisma. But that website is Zeper.org at XEPER.org. Proceed with caution. A researcher who is no longer with us, who passed away recently, who used to have a show right here on this network, Don Nikoloff, once postulated that it appeared to him Michael Aquino could very well be the offspring of Joseph Mengele. We have not had that researched or shown to be true one way or the other, but just looking at the record and the dates and everything, it does seem to be possible. There does seem to be also a little bit of a physical resemblance. Now, Michael Aquino is kind of an interesting guy on a several different levels. I am disgusted by him. I think he's probably one of the most evil people out there. He's very clever, and sort of the way Columbo, always found a way to sort of chum up to and even show a little bit of respect for his I don't know what that noise was, but okay. How Columbo used to sort of even chum up to the murderers as he was about to arrest them. I, in a bit of a weird way, have just kind of a particular appreciation for this guy, because he is just one sick and twisted, really, really off the deep end kind of guy in the field of mind control. And for those who are unfamiliar with any of this, there's a great documentary out there, and you can get it on YouTube. It was put together, I think, in the late 90s by a guy named Marshall Thomas. That video is called Monarch, the New Phoenix Program. And I just checked YouTube, and there's one that's like 2 hours long. That's the one you should look at. There used to be one that was 3 hours long that had some additional footage, and I don't know, it might have been taken down. I didn't see it. But there were 3 different versions of this that came out, and they all had the same first 15-minute introduction. So if viewing through it and you see that portion repeat itself. Don't fret. It's just that that's the second release of it that's beginning. It goes way down the rabbit hole, talking about Paperclip, the early days of Project MK Ultra, the attempts to control the human mind with various drug experiments, the LSD experiments, and all that, shock therapy, the works. It also goes on to discuss psychotronics, which is beam weaponry. And this is the sort of thing they were experimenting with at the beginning of Montauk, before it shifted gears. Raytheon had a big hand in developing beam weaponry for use in what they call V2K, or voice to skull. Basically, it's a gun that someone can point at another individual from a great distance away. And it has a little microphone on it. And when you pull the trigger and speak into the mic, the sound of your voice, whatever you're saying, literally appears in the skull of that targeted individual between their ears, and they literally think they have voices in their head. There are a lot of mental hospitals filled with diagnosed schizophrenics who believe they hear voices in their head when in fact they really did. And they just don't know how it happened or why. So there's a tie-in that this film presents that brings you up to speed and talks about Aquino and his pals, and the nutshell there is that Aquino is one of the original men who stare at ghosts. It's written in the book by John Ronson, and then was later sort of satirized into the film with George Clooney. But the film was not very accurate to the book. Names were changed. Ingo Swann, this guy, this sort of hippie, tripping dude, had developed a method by which someone could, what they call, remote view. And Aquino and his other pals, Bert Stubblebine, retired U.S. Army general, former head of INSCOM, and the former Colonel John B. Alexander, who was formerly the head of Los Alamos Labs. These three guys said, "Yo, Ingo, we really dig your thing. We want to make it serious, and let's go underground. We'll make it a black op. We'll hone this process. We'll get it down to a science, so we can teach it to anybody, and then we'll teach it to our military guys, and we'll go through kind of a sorting process, and we'll pull out the best of the best who seem like to have the best talents in this area, and then we'll form them together, and we'll call them the First Earth Battalion of Psychic Warriors." And there's a book out called Psychic Warrior by David Morehouse that talks about this program. So other similar programs were going on in Russia at the same time. This is sort of a counter response, and the heat was put on to really develop this and get it up to speed and to prove its value. And so some major discoveries were made, some altercations were averted, hostages were found, and crazy things were done that would not have been able to be done without this new amazing sort of psychic telescopy, which they called remote viewing. And it remained a deep seek black CIA project for the longest time. And all of a sudden, suddenly, oh wow, in the 80s, exactly the year. This would be interesting to find out. When did they release SciTech to the public relative to the August 12th, 1983 date, when they shut down Montauk? Anyway, all of a sudden, they come out and they got this new website. It's called scitech.com. Now it's just remoteviewing.com. But slicked up company image and name called Psycho Technologies Incorporated. They called it SciTech for short. They got this hip marketing guy named Dane Spots to do all their marketing videos and all their recruiting. And they established themselves out in Hawaii, where they remain to this day. And then they got this girl, Joni Dureef, to lead the training. And she, in my opinion, is one of the most creepy-looking women I've ever seen in my life. She is just... I can't put my finger on it. I don't want to. I don't like thinking about it. It just gives me chills up my spine. But she's the sister of one of these actors who was one of the major evil dudes in Lord of the Rings. So that's her little tie-in there. But now all of a sudden it's available to the public, and if you pay. They first came out with kind of a 101 basic where you could just buy the course and have it at home on VHS tape. And that costs, I don't know, a couple $100 or $1,000 or whatever it was. But now they don't do that anymore. They took that off, and now you got to go. But it's a trip to Hawaii. Have a nice vacation while at the same time go learn remote viewing, which is now a couple grand, and you go to their facility. I've heard many allegations. It's been my own conclusion that basically what they're doing with people who pay to go there is programming them and giving them sort of a unique marker, like their own fingerprint, so that they can be psychically addressed by other remote viewers at any time and literally tune in to whatever they see or hear remotely. So they're basically walking out, they're stamping out robotic clones who freely show up and pay to be stamped. It's a win-win. People paying for their own subjugation. Now, one other thing about SciTech that becomes known in this documentary, the new Monarch, the new Phoenix program, is that SciTech owns what they call the Smirnoff patent. Not Smirnoff like the vodka with two F's, but Smirnoff with a V. And this patent is for subliminal mind programming through use of interframe video images on a subframe level. Pardon me, folks, bonking going on. I'm trying to find out. Okay. So this is the subliminal programming stuff that they wrote a film out called They Live, all right, whatever. But this is the real deal, and they were using it for a while. That's why they kind of had to make a law about not using it anymore, because they were inserting like Tyler Durden was doing in the film Fight Club, putting in one frame that you don't really see, but it hits your subconscious and you have a reaction to it. Well, on a much finer level, on a subframe level, this became not only possible, but really, really widespread until they put the reins on it. But the patent on the technology is owned by those three guys and by SciTech. And for those who are not familiar with the origins of some of these streaming sites like Hulu, remember the first ads for Hulu with Alec Baldwin? And he was inside an alien lair, and they were coming to program your mind and take over. And okay, they made a big joke about it. but they were joking about what the truth actually is behind the patents of one Hendrikus Loos, Loos. First name Hendrikus, Hendricus. Last name Loos, Loos. This guy is the real Hulu. Look up the patents under his name and see how closely they resemble the scope and intent of the patents I just mentioned, owned by Scitech, the Smirnoff patent. There's clear mind control going on a subliminal level from the streaming service at Hulu. Now, do you think if there's this going on at one, that it is possible also that others like Netflix could possibly be doing it as well? How would you know? I'm just posing these questions, folks, as people stay glued to their devices. Getting back to gun control, we'll return to some more mind control stuff in the second hour. But here's Slick Barry in San Francisco at this mayor's conference. Okay, mind control slave puppet using this latest Charleston, South Carolina shooting as an excuse to ramp up gun control. Well, first of all, it appears to me that this guy, Dylan Roof, the alleged shooter, who I guess he's seen on surveillance video. They showed, okay, maybe he's the shooter. He's the shooter. But just like this other guy, John Holmes, from the Batman shooting, who was also on the news today for the prosecution having rested their case, it appears to me, my humble opinion, that more likely than not, both of these guys are complete Manchurian monarch MK Ultra mind-controlled slaves. It just seems so obvious to me. I don't see why too many other people don't see it. And here's why. We're not taught to think about these things. We're not in a culture that embraces the reality that these things do exist. We fictionalize them and ridicule them, and that's about as much as the conversation goes until people start doing their own homework. So in a knee-jerk kind of fashion, though, he hijacks this mayor's race, this mayor's meeting, whatever it is. Maybe that was the intent and purpose of this meeting, which was scheduled way before the shooting took place. This is not something that just happened after the shooting. They had this on the calendar for a while. So if he came and hijacked that meeting and took it over and talking about this intentionally, then that seems to be the agenda, which makes sense compared, taking into consideration all that I have been evaluating and concluding regarding this issue since I started on it. The listeners of this show may remember an earlier show that I did some months back, again, while I was sitting in for True. It was my first appearance here on this network. And I had hosted 4 individuals who were contributing filmmakers who had just released a new documentary entitled We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook. Now, I call it Sandy Hoax. I've continued to do considerable research on this. These people behind this film obviously are way on it, and they remain to be on it at this very day, relentlessly. And to sum up what I've been able to conclude, it appears clear that there are no records of any deaths whatsoever at that event, that it clearly appears to be a staged FEMA drill with many, many hired, quote-unquote, crisis actors involved. Some of the names and faces were recycled and used again in Boston. It's really sort of pathetic um, for a learned researcher who's on it to discover these things. But most people do not, and by and large, they get away with this stuff because they've bought everyone's silence and complicity on down the line through the media channels. It's obviously, again, it's more control of the story. Repeat the lie often enough, people will believe it's the truth. The media wants to drill those hoaxes into your head as you consider what Slick Barry has been talking to you about on the television today with regard to his new, tougher stance on gun control. The media will toss out the tragic shootings of Sandy Hook, the loss of children's lives, and then, cut to John Holmes sitting there in the courtroom today with the prosecution resting from the Batman shooting, right? And then an interesting little comment kind of made me a little perturbed, how the clergy and apparently the shooting occurred in this this predominantly black AME church, very Christian, in a Bible study class, okay? And the media, the guy on there is like, deeply religious victims. Well, remember, he's talking about Christians, not Catholics, real Christians. In my opinion, honest, practicing Christians. Certainly, their comments and actions seem to indicate that. From what I've been able to see so far. However, a curious word used there, religious. Folks, now I take great exception to that use because in my world, having come to understand what Christianity is and what Christians really are about, which is in essence just being like Christ, walking in his footsteps as much as they are capable of. It is one of my fundamental understandings that Jesus mocked religion. He did not start one. So when I hear Christians being described as religious, I take a deep breath and I say a prayer for the misunderstanding of the person who just said it, because I think there's a great difference between religion and those who are practicing Christianity. I know that many listeners who are of different religions will take great exception to that. And, there's not a whole lot I can do for you. I get really frustrated when I see these bumper stickers that say coexist, right? And they have all the little symbols, all the letters are made up of like every different religious symbol possibly, with the T being, the Christian cross. It's frustrating to me because my personal belief system says that Jesus wasn't kidding when he said there's only one way to God, and that's through me. And you should not put other gods before me. Men cannot become, I could go on, but in essence, Buddha, okay, he's still in his grave. Jesus, not so much. Muhammad, still in his grave. Jesus, not so much. It's my understanding that many of these other world religions are descended of Babylon, the ancient mystery religions of Babylon, Egypt, India, Persia, Greece. They're all forms of pantheism, which gave way to not only Kabbalism, Gnosticism, the Knights Templars, the Rosicrucians, all Freemasonry and Illuminati, but also witchcraft, sorcery, divination, spiritism, most occult practices, Eastern religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Shintoism, and etc. all of this is now descended into this crystal-hugging hippie world of New Age movement where yoga is cool. All right, well, I don't remember Jesus ever saying anything about yoga. And you know, at the core of all Freemasonry and these satanic groups is Nimrod. I'm just going off on a side note here, but that, you know, the basic ancient treasure, that the biggest secrets that the Freemasons have are, where are the various dismembered and dissected pieces of Nimrod buried? Here in San Francisco, we have this Unity Center, not too far away from here. It's in kind of a nice neighborhood. And all are welcome. Come in and share, you know, in a universally accepted, you know, all religions are tolerated, you know, it's the Unity Center. And, you know, if you're a Buddhist, you can go in there. If you're a Muslim, you can go in there. If you're even a Satanist, you can go in there. And if you are a Christian, well, no. There's nothing about Jesus, and there's nothing for Christians here. We meant everybody except Christians, but they don't say it in their title, and they don't say it on the walls, but they say it without saying it, because they say everything else about every other religion and nothing about Christianity. I went in there and I tasked them for it. I said, wait a minute. You mean you don't have anything in here on Jesus? There's nothing in here? And they just kind of looked at me with blank faces like I asked them the dumbest question ever. And just said, nope. I got kind of upset, so I just kind of went outside, took some photographs, and, you know, and they were all spooked out on me. They were all like thinking I'm some kind of terrorist. But, yeah, folks, you have these mind control puppet masters all descended from these Babylonian, quote-unquote, religions. And now we're in this world of New Age crystal hugging hippies, where Burning Man and all these things are just like, you know, do as thou wilt. It's all good. You know, you're not accountable for your actions. Go and party, party, party. Here, try this yoga. You're going to love it. Well, folks, one day we're going to be accountable. It's not all party, party, party. And I really pray that more people begin to wake up. You're listening to freedomslips.com Revolution Radio. My name is Alex Studer. This is the story behind the story. I am the co-host filling in for True, who can't make it. This is listener-supported radio. Please donate. The only reason I'm talking to you now is because somebody like you made a substantial donation some time ago. Please help keep free radio alive. We're going to take a break here for a couple minutes. We're going to have some public service announcements, a couple of things that do help float some of the differences between donations and such. Don't go away. We'll be back in the second hour. We're going to talk more about these control issues of mind control, gun control, control over what you think, control over what you perceive. Don't go away. We'll be right back. That's right, folks. Music is the doctor of the soul. It's the universal language that we all speak. And even though most of the music we listen to is at a very dissonant frequency base with tuned to A equals 440, it still expresses itself in so many beautiful, beautiful forms. Hopefully, most of us transgress beyond the dissonant nature of the 440 tuning and find beauty in music for what it is. Certainly True has done some breakthrough research into 432 tuning. I have done my own in addition, and I'm making a personal commitment as a musician to do future composing work in the tuning of 432. It's going to be hard, though, because it's kind of hard to get a real piano and a Hammond B3 to adjust away from their fixed tuning, so I'm not sure how to complete those hurdles, but burn that bridge when we get to it. I am your co-host, Alex Studer, coming to you from the top of a a giant mountain of unsorted, clean laundry in the back of a rusted-out ice cream truck somewhere under a bridge in the city of San Francisco. It's been a crazy day here today. And, folks, as I described in the first hour, a lot going on. We had Slick Berry in town. We had Dub Nation celebration, and just a lot going on. Today's topic is it's kind of multifaceted. We've been talking about the word control, talking about gun control, disease control, weather control, and mind control. Really focusing in on mind control more than anything else today, folks. You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. This is listener-supported radio. The only reason I'm here on the air talking to you now is because someone like you made a donation. So please do your part if you can. No donation is too small. Every penny goes to a good cause of keeping this kind of radio alive. Again, the phones are open for the remaining hour for anyone who wishes to call in with any comment whatsoever, or just to say hi. It's kind of lonely in here. Area code 310-421-4053 is the number, and on Skype it's Freedom Screen 2. As music being the doctor, anyone interested in hearing any of my music work, I've been composing professionally for film and television for many decades, several decades. I'm not that old, but and producing records. I finally made or pushed a pile of songs that I've had ready for a long time out in the form of my own solo album. I did it last year, and you can go hear many of the tracks from it, or buy one if you like. By all means, they're moderately priced considering how much great material is on there. Just go to my blog at labvirus.com, and over on the right hand side there's a button that says Alex's Music. That's the easiest way to go there. Otherwise, it's Alex friendly website address, so maybe I might change that in the future as I push more material out, as more is forthcoming, guaranteed. So we ended the last hour with my chagrin at Christians being religious, labeled religious by the media. We're talking about this Charleston, South Carolina shooting, where I believe, not only the shooter is MK Ultra, but so is Slick Berry asking for stricter gun control. And folks, I've asserted straight away that my take on gun control is that gun control is using two hands and hitting your target. Guns are inanimate objects. They are not capable of shooting people without a person attached to them controlling its actions. Until used as a weapon, a gun is merely an object, a firearm. A crayon can be used as a weapon, or it can be used as a crayon. I ended also by sort of saying that, think twice about yoga. And I'm going to sort of side channel for a minute because I really want to address this. I've gotten so many, young people here and anywhere, I'm sure, are all just into their yoga. It's so part of their routine. And I'm doing Pilates, or I'm doing Bikram, or oh my God, everybody's got their yoga mat and they're like around, everybody's got their tight pants on, and it's just like the new trendy thing for all young people. Okay. And that's great and all, except that nobody understands its origins from the Hindu religion. And if they did their homework, I think that more practicing Christians would probably think twice about doing yoga. And I'm just going to read to you, folks, a couple paragraphs from this this writer, Mac Major, over at a website called EdenDecoded.com, where we talk about yoga. And the title of the article is Seduced by the Serpent, Yoga and the Devil's Door. Too many Christians think that there's nothing wrong with practicing yoga. Some argue that it's a health benefit, a form of exercise, and that it helps them to meditate more and pray to God. The truth is, Christianity has absolutely nothing to do with yoga. Yoga is a Hindu religious practice that is designed to open oneself to visitation and possession by outside spiritual entities, better known as demons. And folks, I've talked about these many times. I just call them critters. They're transdimensional demonic entities, TDEs. Sometimes they have to deal with us, and when they do, they put a little suit on and they appear to us as grays. The gray thing is just like a little suit. It's an avatar. But you don't have to take my word for it. Below are a collection of quotes straight from the source, those who practice yoga. And their quotes tell you about yoga as it was always intended to be practiced. You can take a pig and put lipstick on it, clean it up, tie a ribbon around its neck, and you can even go out your way and call it a cute puppy. But at the end of the day, it's still a pig. Through the practice of yoga, Christian people are tricked into praying to Hindu demonic gods. Now, here's the truth about yoga. Quote, yoga is an integral part of the Hindu religion. There is a saying, there's no yoga without Hinduism and no Hinduism without yoga. The country of origin of yoga is undoubtedly India, where for many hundreds of years it has been a part of man's activities directed toward higher spiritual achievements. The yoga philosophy is peculiar to the Hindus, and no trace of it is found in any other nation, ancient or modern. It was the fruit of the highest intellectual and spiritual development. The history of yoga is long and ancient, unquote. And that's from A Tribute to Hinduism. One more quote. Yoga, quote, yoga has been shamelessly rebranded to make it more acceptable to Western culture, but this is based on a lie. But as yoga became more popular and as the industry grew to be worth nearly $6 billion, and as the variety of savvy marketers began branding their special yoga techniques, it was hard not to notice that few yoga teachers and journals mention the origins of the practice and its connection to Hinduism. Yoga was secularized to rid it of any taint of a pagan tradition. The practice, the savvy marketers claimed, was a spiritual path, but not a religious one, to calm the committed Christian who wanted to hang on to Jesus while doing the Surya Namaskara, or obeisance to the sun. And that's from Dr. Ramesh Nagaraj Rao, the Human Rights Coordinator for the Hindu American Foundation and Professor and Chair, Department of Communication Studies and Theater at the Longwood University. I will not continue to read those quotes, but for those who want to go read, we're going to go back into mind control. And we're going to cross-blend it into disease control. As I mentioned earlier, folks, here in California, we are fighting an uphill battle against this mandate vaccine assembly bill, Senate Bill 277, which is now on the assembly floor for a final vote before it heads to Governor Jesuit Edomite Jerry Brown, where he has already indicated he intends to sign it. Okay. There's two other bills just like it, if not worse. One of them aims at healthcare workers in the same sort of way, and I'm just learning about another one, which now says anyone who is arrested, they can make they can mandate medical procedures on simply by declaring them mentally incompetent. So they can force inject anybody they arrest, and if this bill gets passed, it's Senate Bill 4 or something. Okay. This guy, Dr. Richard Pan, who's allegedly the co-author of many of these, he didn't write them. He's, in my opinion, another MK Manchurian candidate slave, folks. And you should be familiar at least with the films that were made out of Hollywood that talked about this. A long time ago, there was a film called Sybil, a book first, and then a movie. Sybil, played by Sally Field. And then, of course, the black and white film, The Manchurian Candidate, with old Blue Eyes. Right? Anybody remember that? And then it was remade. Okay? These are very real issues. They're not in movies in such a form because they don't exist. So we're talking about some of the original people behind all this, and I highlighted Michael Aquino and talked about him for a bit. He's in that film Monarch, the New Phoenix Program by Marshall Thomas that you can find on YouTube. Well, one of the things that makes him so important is because currently he's, many allege, he's currently the most high-ranking officer at the NSA. Beyond any of the poster kids that they put out alleging to be in charge of the NSA. I've heard through the grapevine that he's been seen several times at the very hush-hush Camp Williams site in Camp Williams, Utah. You know, we have this Edward Snowden whistleblower, okay? Everybody's like, oh, Ed Snowden, what a patriot. He's, finally blowing the lid on the NSA. Okay, great and all, but what has he said about Camp Williams? And what has he said so far that I really didn't know already? He has yet to tell me anything I do not already know. So anyway, here we have, this vaccine issue. It looks to me like, okay, Dr. Richard Pan is a mind-controlled slave sent to, just be the guy that walks this through, which, has obviously been prepared way in advance by a shady team of other people who are handling him. So being under mind control, this guy Pan really is a walking pandemic. But there's an article about him, and it shows him that he is a California state senator in District 6. And this comes from the Health Impact News at vaccineimpact.com. The Sacramento Bee is reporting this week that that which the alternative media has been reporting for months, that California state lawmakers are supporting Senate Bill 277 to remove all parental exemptions to vaccines have direct financial ties to the makers of the vaccines. I'm so shocked. Pharmaceutical companies and their trade groups gave more than $2 million to current members of the legislature in 2013 and 14, about 2% of the total raised, records show. 9 of the top 20 recipients are either legislative leaders or serve on either the Assembly or Senate Health Committees. Receiving more than $95,000, the top recipient of industry campaign cash is Senator Richard Pan, a Sacramento Democrat and doctor who is carrying the vaccine bill. In addition, the industry donated more than $500,000 to outside campaign spending groups that helped elect some current members last year. Pharmaceutical companies also spent nearly $3 million more during the 2013-14 legislative session lobbying the legislature, the governor, the state pharmacist board, and other agencies, according to state filings. Dr. Richard Pan's ties to Big Pharma. Dr. Richard Pan is the author of Bill 277, and as a state senator, he's already used his powerful influence to get the bill passed by the California State Senate. The California State House is expected to vote on the bill next week. Who is Dr. Pan? He's a quote-unquote industry insider when it comes to the medical industry. He's a teaching facility faculty member at UC Davis Children's Hospital and has served in many organizations that set medical policy and determine medical funding, such as the AMA, the United Way, Sacramento First 5 Commission, Healthy Kids, Healthy Future, Sacramento Health Improvement Project, and others. Dr. Pan has flip-flopped on the issue of vaccines and parental choice since becoming a state senator. He was previously a member of the House, where he introduced another bill regarding vaccines, AB 2109, which required parents seeking an exemption to get doctors' approval first. During debate of that bill in 2012, he was on record as stating that a parent should have a right to choose to refuse vaccines for their children. However, seizing on the recent Disney measles hysteria, However, seizing on the recent Disney measles hysteria earlier in 2015, he now states it's a matter of public health and that parents should be denied that right. Here's a little video, it shows him kind of saying all that. All right. A lot of people calling for his recall. An attempt to recall the election has begun and a petition has already been started. We call on California State Senator Dr. Richard Pan to resign from his position due to his vested interest in profiting from Merck, GSK, and literally dozens of pharmaceutical companies and the conflict of interest this causes. There's lots of protests. Okay. Another mind-controlled slave, folks. So we got shooters, we got presidents, we got assembly members trying to take our vaccine rights away. Who else is mind-controlled? And how would you know? Let's discuss that for a minute, folks. We're going to read something from Fritz Springmeier. Many of you will recognize that name. He was jailed in 2001 by the FBI, along with his wife. He and a partner of his, Cisco Wheeler, wrote some very good, informative books. Probably got him in a bit of trouble, and it's what happens when you tell the truth. However, we're going to read something from a book he wrote called the Illuminati Formula to Create an Undetectable Total Mind Control Slave. Before we do, I'm just going to comment a little bit about, since I already talked about it, Camp Williams, Utah. What is it? Well, it's a giant secret. Anybody who goes there will sort of get shot at like as if you were at Area 51. And we know it consumes an unbelievable amount of electricity, more than the entire Salt Lake Valley. So what's it doing? Well, it's a giant information collection database processing center, they'll say. Well, why do you need it? Because you already announced you already had TIA, or Total Information Awareness, completed years ago, which means you're already recording every little bit of data there is out there possible to be gathered anyway, and you're probably running it off a tiny little 386 in the corner. What is this giant thing for? Well, I don't know, but I can take a wild guess. And so far, that guess to me points at mass mind control, which partners up with an agenda to have us all chipped. Many of these MK individuals are very much chipped. The rest of us, in my humble opinion, are being chipped without our consent or knowledge by way of artificially intelligent fibers growing inside of us from a condition known as Morgellons. That is a combination of stuff we breathe in from chemtrails and other force multipliers introduced through our food chain. There's a site called morgellonsexposed.com run by Jan Smith, and there's a page on there called Racing Down the Road to Transhumanism, where it clearly shows what appears to be a fully assembled transceiver array with processing banks and antenna and lens, and this is a chip, and it just grew inside of somebody, and it was just plucked out. So, following the thinking that everybody has Morgellons, which so far has yet to be disproven, you can rest assured that something like that is growing inside you somewhere, and you don't even know it. Which to me is part of the chipping agenda, which I believe to be sort of the other side of the coin from where this control center. And again, we get to the word control. I believe that's what Camp Williams is. I think it's a control center for a mass mind control operation, which targets people in a worldwide fashion. Again, that's just a guess. I've also heard through the grapevine that there's some vast underground installations under there. Not surprised, knowing what I know, and have researched about deep underground military stuff, bases and so forth. So, just tying that in. Oh, also regarding the measles, which he used to sort of fast forward this Senate Bill 277. Not one measles case has been reported in the American school system, period, since that occurred. Throwing that out there, folks. All right, so now we're going to read from Fritz Springmeier, and this may take us out through the end of the hour. I don't know. This is kind of a long read, but I'll do my best. It's a very, very important chapter. It's chapter 2, and it's the traumatization and torture of the victim. And as we talk about satanic ritual abuse, folks, and the Satanism aspect of all these people involved in mind control, you're going to hear right now how satanic it really is. This is really heart-wrenching stuff. It's traumatic. It's very gross. It's torturous. And that's what these people do to the victims who ultimately have their personalities split and they become sibyls. So here we go. It's science number 2, the traumatization and torture of the victim. And this again by Fritz Springmeier from the Illuminati Formula to Create an Undetectable Total Mind Control Slave. The basis for the success of the monarch mind control programming is that different personalities or personality parts called alters can be created who do not know each other, but who can take the body at different times. The amnesia walls that are built by traumas form a protective shield of secrecy that protects the abuser from being found out and prevents the front personalities who hold the body much of the time how their system of alters is being used. The shield of secrecy allows cult members to live and work around other people and remain totally undetected. The front alters can be wonderful Christians, and the deeper alters can be the worst type of satanic monster imaginable. A Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde effect. A great deal is at stake in maintaining the secrecy of the intelligence agency or the occult group, which is controlling the slave. The success rate of this type of programming is high, but when it fails, the failures are discarded through death. Each trauma and torture serves a purpose. A great deal of experimentation and research went into finding out what can and can't be done. Charts were made showing how much torture a given body weight at a given age can handle without death. Now, this is why the Nazis did all those strange concentration camp experiments where they tested how quickly people would freeze or die from various traumas. It was for mind control. The abuses are very specific and scientific in their torture. A lab technician with a clipboard walks around monitoring the E for the children when they receive their initial traumas. Heart monitors are closely watched. Still, many children died from the programming. The programmers learned that when a child rolled up in a fetal position, it had given up the will to live. They learned to time how fast this would occur to get an idea how far to push the child. Parents in eastern United States were taken to Harvard University for training to teach them how much trauma they could give their children at home before they would die. After the children got back from their initial programming, they were to receive daily traumas to keep them dissociative. The initial splits and initial programming done at China Lake, California. Primary or initial torture for many children in western U.S. was done at China Lake, which officially has gone under the designations Naval Ordnance Test Station, pronounced in short as NOTS or NOTS, Naval Weapons Center, NWC, Ridgecrest, the town nearby, and Inyokern, the area. The address of Nimitz Hospital is the code 232 Naval Air Weapons Station. The base was set up to test new weapons. Evidently, the Navy decided that mind-controlled people were an important weapon to test. Most of the new weapons created at China Lake were, for the most part, human robots, turned out in large numbers. The Monarch mind control was carried out in large airplane hangars on the base, which have been able to house thousands of tiny cages just large enough for human babies. Lots of 1,000 babies was a small batch. According to people who worked in the hangars helping program, many batches were 2,000 to 3,000 babies. Many survivors remember the thousands of cages housing little children from ceiling to floor. The cages were hot wired, electrified on the ceiling, bottom, and sides, so that the children who are locked inside can receive horrific electric shocks to their bodies to groom their minds to split into multiple personalities. These cages are called woodpecker grids. The victim sees a flash of light when high DC voltage is applied. Later, this flash of light is used with hypnotic induction to make the person think that they are going into another dimension when they are blasted with high voltage. In the Peter Pan programming, the programmers tell the slaves that this is riding the light. One of the popular traumas after the small child has endured the woodpecker grid cages for days is to rape it. The rape is intentionally brutal so that it will be as traumatic as possible. Many of the technical people on the base are civilians. This is in part because part of the research involves mind control, and Illuminati civilian mind control experts have come and gone from the base. The California Institute of Technology at Pasadena is intimately connected to China Lake's research, and also, by the way, to the Illuminati. Also, much of the work at the facility is for the intelligence agencies and not the military. Intelligence assets are often civilians. One of the things developed in the California universities and then implemented at China Lake was color programming, which we covered later in this book. Red and green were discovered to be the most visible colors for programming. Various colored flashing lights were used in programming at knots. Survivors of the programming all remember flashing lights. The use of flashing lights has been introduced into American culture by the CIA. If a person goes into bars and places where bands play, you will notice multicolored lights flashing. The flashing lights create disassociation, especially in people who are programmed. How children are transported to a major programming site. A list of major programming centers is given in an appendix along with each site's programming specialties. In this chapter, an example of just one of the bases used for early programming is given in the large and very secret China Lake facility in California near Death Valley. The children are brought into the China Lake NWC, also known as NOTS, based by train, planes, and cars. A number of the small airfields which fly these children into China Lake have been identified. One, which is no longer in use for moving children, was a private airstrip at Sheridan, Oregon, which was beside a large lumber mill. The lumber mill had an agreement to secretly house the children who had their mouths taped. Neighbors in the area were bought off and warned that if they talked, they'd be in trouble for breaching national security. The area has lots of mills joined by train tracks, which were used to shuttle the children around. Tied into this network was a Catholic monastery, which lies between Sheridan and McMinnville, close to the rail network. The Union train station in Portland, Oregon, has underground tunnels where children were temporarily warehoused in cages before continuing on their journey. The Jesuits were active in this part of the child procurement. Catholic adoption agencies, which are many, nuns who get pregnant, third world parents, and parents who will sell their children, all sources of children for programming. When one thinks about how many corrupt people there are and how many towns and cities are on the West Coast, how many children are produced by satanic readers, illegal aliens, and other parents who'd rather have the money than children, and the reader begins to realize how procuring batches of 1,000 to 2,000 children was no problem for the Illuminati working through intelligence agencies such as CIA, NIS, DIA, FBI, and FEMA. The Finders, a joint CIA-FBI group, procured children for the network for years. And folks, there's another program, a documentary on YouTube, Conspiracy of Silence. Go look that up. Talks about that. Some of the children needed for programming are to be used for sacrifices to traumatize those being programmed. The names of some of those people who work at procuring children for programming have been released in Fritz Springer's monthly newsletter. Okay. The secret FEMA airstrip at Santa Rosa has planes landing and leaving all night. Some of these flights go east and then land at the secret 1,800 square mile China Lake Naval Research Base, are believed to carry children for programming. This airstrip is called the Santa Rosa Air Center. When I tried to get FAA information on this airstrip, they played stupid as if it doesn't exist, yet it's in operation. Southwest of Santa Rosa is this air center, which is not used by the public. This airport was recently used by private pilots as FBO. It was built during World War II as a training base for P-32 pilots, deactivated in 1952. After the war, it was leased to private companies such as the CIA. Paved areas are 4 feet of concrete and can land the heaviest planes in use. There are no buildings over 2 stories in the entire area and no control tower. The FBI have a contingent in the federal building downtown Santa Rosa, and FEMA has a radio station at the airport. Army Reserve also has some buildings in the area. However, there's some highly secret activity going underground at the airport. 6 to 7 small planes sneak out of the closed base a day, and for a base of its description that's closed, that's very interesting. The planes take off in the evening and do not turn their lights on until hundreds of feet in the air. Press Democrat of Santa Rosa ran an article in 1993 about the federal government selling 70 acres of property just to the east of the airport. However, when one reads closely, the land's going to be offered to a host of federal agencies. The property was being used by FEMA. If one thinks about it, it's unlikely the radio station is a FEMA transmitter station. The airport used for Bohemian Grove visitors is north of Santa Rosa on Highway 101, the Sonoma County Airport. United Express and American Eagle fly into this airport, which has a control tower. In 1964, the airport was reported to have also carried about 600 military operations, either takeoff and landing per year. It was around this time the federal government made an agreement with Sonoma County to help pay for the runway to be extended. Secret NW lounge with a wooden sign naming it as UN Underground. Slaves are hunted in the woods for sports. Occult rituals, including infant sacrifice, are held outdoors in the grove. Now, folks, this is not something like the normal membership experiences, okay? I've personally been up to the grove, and they have these, the encampments coming up. They're a 3-week thing in July. They had their spring jinx a little while ago. It's sort of a father-son, dad weekend kind of thing. All right? When Fritz talks about these things, there are things that go on privately on the grounds by maybe 1 or 2 members and their friends. Okay, I'm not saying everybody at the Grove is like this, but yeah, I've heard some stories. I'm not discounting what he says. These airfields are described in detail so the reader can begin to catch on to the network of small planes and airfields the Monarch system uses to transport children. The children are trickled in from various collection points to China Lake. Monarch slaves, many of them children themselves, are used in the extensive child procurement system. Children are also used to entice and kidnap other children. Teenage slaves are used to escort and transport little children on trains, buses, and planes. The triangular-shaped airfield at China Lake has traditionally begun very early in the morning with lots of activity. The night flights from FEMA's Santa Rosa airfield being an example of incoming flights. The airfield connects to the main base by Sandquist roads. Some of the fact that children are driving through the gates is not alarming because inside the military perimeter is a high school, junior high, and 3 other schools. Some of the adults of the children being programmed stay in military barracks while they wait. A male Monarch victim remembers a large hangar building at China Lake with a concrete floor and row after row of cages suspended from the ceiling, filling the large building. One of the programmers was dressed similar to a Catholic priest. The electric current that ran to the cages made a hum like an electric fence. There was a marble slab that served as an altar where black-hooded robed people would take a bone-handled knife, and sacrifice little children in front of the other children in the cages. It is alleged that Charles Manson, who himself is a programmed monarch slave, received initial programming at China Lake and lived with his cult only 45 miles northwest of China Lake at the Myers and Barker ranches. Scotty's Castle in Death Valley, Bakersfield, Edwards Air Force Base, and Papa Ludo's store and tavern with its secret underground programming center are all in the vicinity of China Lake. They all have been programming sites too. Old Route 66 went by China Lake, which is now just off US 395. The area's tavern has been named the Hideaway. The building was low, away from the highway, with a large unlit parking lot. Only people who knew how to get in from the obscure entrance on the side could get in. The Hideaway Tavern has been a local hangout for the CIA men in China Lake. It served them excellent steaks. The base headquarters is known as the White House. It looks something like a yacht clubhouse. Northwest of the airfield, 3964 and 433 east on the quad maps, the government has built a large medical seal of Solomon, a hexagram, with each leg a quarter-mile long on the ground. What was it like for a victim in the early 50s in a Knott's area programming center? I'm going to skip a little further, and we're going to go down to what trauma does. In recent times, the military and the science of psychology is paying attention to what they call PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD are the psychopathic debilitating effects of trauma and chronic nature of reactions to trauma. Intrusive flashbacks of the trauma will occur if the mind doesn't protect itself from reminders of the trauma. The mind creates avoidance patterns to protect itself from thinking about the trauma. Panic symptoms occur when the person undergoes physiological arousal to traumatic cues. A trauma will create a certain shatteredness within the victim. The victim will develop life assumptions about being vulnerable, about having little personal worth, and that life is not fair. They may develop phobias to constantly check their environment for safety and constantly monitor others to make sure they're not mistreated. For centuries, warfare has taken place and military men have experienced PTSD. However, a full description and investigation of the disorder has not been done, or has been done only in recent history. The U.S. military has prevented any serious counseling for their troops suffering from this. Peer counselors and rap groups were allowed and misled by the Army to believe they'd be adequate. PTSD will often lead to outbursts of rage, chronic depression, or borderline dysfunctions. The PTSD in monarch victims is masked by the MPD, DID, and the programming. Then, in turn, the programming masks the MPD, and MPD, folks, is multiple personality disorder. When the programming is complete, front alters have been created which can function with smiles and cheerful attitudes, while underneath the mind is full of shattered, hurting alters who the slave is unaware of. Self-punishment and social withdrawal are natural symptoms of PTSD, and the programmers have no trouble in enhancing and programming these functions into their alter systems. Certain alters end up holding the anger, the fear, the social withdrawal, the guilt, and the desire for self-punishment. These are held in check by the programming and take the body when the slave steps outside of the programmed path. The bad memories in the minds of men who suffer from PTSD have been noted to recycle and self-perpetuate themselves as they lie unresolved in the memory cells. Bad memories for the victims of monarch programming are used to hold the MPD, the programming, in place, and also to keep the victim in compliance. In 1954, Maslow published his hierarchy of needs, which, when applied to monarchs and PTSD victims, means that they cannot progress in therapy until their survival and safety needs are met. However, the programmers and abusers know that it's important to keep the slave away from safety. To this end, the programmers employ people externally to monitor the slaves and internal alters in the victims' minds to be monitoring alters and reporting alters. Reporting alters can always reach the network of abusers via 1-800 phone numbers, which change every 2 weeks. They can also call their handler. Reporting alters are very unemotional and serve as tape recorders which mechanically report any developments that might threaten the programming to their handler. Alters programmed to commit suicide are also built into the system. This is known as omega programming. There's alpha, beta, all the way down to omega, and usually the last couple are self-terminating. Okay, hold on. Alters programmed to commit suicide. Okay, for instance, for a system hacker, an outsider, to work with the alters of an internal Grand Druid Council, also known as an executive committee alters or judge alters, or a system almost ensures 99% of the time suicide of the monarch slave. In at least 99% of the cases where monarchs who have come in for therapy, they still lack safety, which is a higher need than trying to go against their programming. This is why so few people have really gotten free. To undo the programming, the victim needs safety. The programmers know this and have set up almost fail-safe methods where the victim is not even safe from their own system of alters, let alone Big Brother. Therapists call their monarch victims survivors, a misnomer, because in reality they are still in the middle of ongoing abuse. Some therapists may mistakenly think that it is helpful to tell the victim, these fears you have are from the past. Deliverance ministries may also try to stop the victim's fears without understanding the reason behind the ongoing fear. Other chapters will deal with the extensive backup methodologies. At this point, it's mentioned in the context of this chapter to establish to the reader that the abuse and torture continue non-stop. Some of this would naturally occur anyway, but the programmers enhance this naturally occurring phenomena many-fold to ensure that the slave will continually abuse themselves. This means, as time progresses, some monarch systems are timed to shatter certain levels and to create new ones. If the programmers want, they can shatter a front Christian altar level and create a new level of New Age believing altars to replace the original front. The abuse can be done by the victim themselves to themselves because programming altars are given the ability to pull up horrific memories by way of codes. Those traumatic memories, which shattered the mind in the first place, are still capable of doing it again when they are abreacted, that is, relived by the body and mind. More and more people are experiencing working with someone with multiple personalities. However, very few multiples ever discover more than the front parts of their system. Very few people outside the programmers have much idea of what an entire system of altars is like. Therefore, some of the things that this book will describe will seem foreign to those people who have learned a little about multiplicity. There are several models to describe what happens inside a multiple's brain as it develops multiple personalities. The brain is very complex. Recent brain research confirms the brain was far more complex than imagined. In an average brain, there are 10 billion individual neuron cells. Each of these has 10 with 100 zeros following it worth of interconnections. In other words, an average brain has vastly more interconnections than the total number of atoms in the universe. Often about 1/2 million different chemical reactions take place every minute in the average brain, and the number can be several times that during intense activity. A monarch's brain has been worked on to be even more active than a normal person's brain. The left and the right side of the brain both work simultaneously in a monarch, and their various personalities are all busy working simultaneously on different tracks. To describe the complexity of what's happening with someone's mind who's been messed up so dramatically for years means that at times only an approximate model is presentable. There are several terms which are used in speaking about multiples which have developed several meanings. Unless these terms are correctly defined, misconceptions about them can cloud an understanding of what happens during monarch programming. First, research has discovered that deep within a person, the brain truly understands in a pure awareness all about itself. This is true for everyone. Pure awareness has been named various names, including hidden observer. If a man is obnoxious and seems to have a total lack of awareness that he irritates people, just know that deep down in awareness realizes exactly what he is and what he does. The multiple's brain in some deep awareness knows what has happened to it. The term hidden observer is fraught with danger, though. A demonic entity called the hidden observer works hand in glove with the programmer to program the individual. The hidden observer is able to see everything the system does. The people who control as slave frequently call up the hidden observer to ask questions. In this case, it is a demonic entity, and yet it is this hidden observer which each system has that some therapists are trying to access to understand the system. This hidden observer only tells the truth to its master because it is demonic. The next term which is misunderstood is the term the core. The programmers set up various altars to pretend to be the core and the core's protector. The real core is quite hidden and not placed within the regular grid of the altar system's chart. It will take some explaining to convey what happens to the mind and what the real core is. A little bit about the types of trauma. I'm just going to read on until we run out of time. We got about 8 minutes left, folks. Thanks for bearing with me. But this is important, and it's important, folks, that we all learn the reality of what true mind control is. And yes, folks, it's got some very satanic ritual abuse origins. One thing discovered by research into the genetic transmission of learned knowledge by humans to their children was that people are born with certain fears. And remember, Truott invented false expectations appearing real. Snakes, blood, seeing internal body parts, and spiders are all things that people are born fearing. The phobias toward these things are passed down genetically from one generation to another. In searching for traumas to apply to little children, the programmers found that these natural phobias, which occur in most people from birth, will work wonderful to split the mind. Along this line, the following are samples of traumas done to program slaves. A. Being locked in a small confined spot, a pit or cage with spiders and snakes. B. Being forced to kill and cut up and eat innocent victims. Or C. Immersion into feces, urine, and containers of blood. Then being made to eat these things. These are standard traumas. Often a slave will experience not only all of the above, but many others before they reach 4 or 5 years of age. It's important to traumatize the child early before it has a chance to develop its ego states. By the way, when the child is placed into a small box with spiders or snakes, they'll often be told that if they play dead, the snake will not bite. This carries out two things for the programmers. It lays the basis for suicide programs, i.e., if you're dead, then you're safe. And it teaches the child to dissociate. Traumas to split the mind are not just high voltage or natural phobias, but encompass the full range of the emotional and spiritual being of the victim. The victim is eventually stripped of every spiritual or emotional resources by a variety of traumas, such as blood orgies where male and female genitals are cut, torture sessions of all types of medieval torture machines, staged events where actors imitating God, Jesus, police, and therapists curse the victim, reject the victim, and even kill the victim in simulated drug deaths. Children are placed in hospitals in captive, abusive conditions. Children are tied to innocent children, which are systematically and brutally killed, while the children are made to believe that they are guilty for the child's punishment. Near-death experiences, such as drowning, have become an art with these abusers. Waterboarding, for example. Trained dogs, monkeys, and other animals are used to further traumatize the victims. An Illuminati slave will most likely have experienced all of the last few paragraphs above, plus more. Toby was one of the trained Knott's chimpanzees. He was trained to be sadistic. The other trained chimpanzees at China Lake included Gabriel, who tickled the victim while they were tied up. Rastice, who had a toy chest with diamonds, bracelets, and a scepter which electroshocked. Zora, who could do anything mean. Elmore, who cuddled as a mother but ate raw flesh, plus others. An example of something said during programming with the chimps is 3 little monkeys in a cage. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's from Joseph Mengele. Oh, he was also Dr. Green. Was skilled at using German shepherds to attack people. So both you and Karen and Joseph apparently used the moniker Dr. Green. Mengele got a reputation in the Nazi concentration camps for abusing German shepherds because he was brought over to America. Before he was brought over to America, he used dogs to help program American children. And more on Mengele and the rest of this. I'm going to stop here because we only got a couple minutes left, folks. But again, this is a very, very important read. If you don't have it yet, get your hands on Fritz Springmeier's. He also co-wrote with Cisco Wheeler the Illuminati formula to create an undetectable total mind control slave. It's a substantial read, but it's well worth your time and energy, folks, especially considering all that's going on with this Charleston, South Carolina, this Batman shooting, this guy running around telling everybody, "Hey, I'm your president," and so many other issues. Including this guy, Dr. Richard Pan. Learn about mind control, folks. It's very, very real. Watch that film, Monarch, the new Phoenix program. Learn about targeted individuals. Learn more about this pedophilia and the satanic ritual abuse. True will be on next week, hopefully. Thank you all for listening in. This is Alex for The Story Behind the Story signing off. Again, listener-supported radio. Please donate. Tune in again next week. Signing off, Alex from San Francisco. You guys have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in.